Hi there, folks out there in internet land. I'm Alfred, and welcome to our new astrology study group. As you can see, I'm all prepared with my various symbols here, so I can show you exactly what's going on. Now, Fox mentioned to you last week that we are starting a whole new slew of study groups, this one included, and we'll get right down to brass tacks. So I'm going to be throwing a lot at you this week, so but don't worry about it. Ask as many questions as you have to, but you will understand everything in the weeks to come. Okay, so the books I will be using, we have Llewellyn's Complete Book of Astrology by Chris Brandt Risk. This is going to be our comprehensive guide. We'll be introducing a couple of texts out there for further reading if you need it, but this is going to be my Bible for this study group, and also eventually you'll be able to order it through us if you're interested. As you progress on through the course of study, we might hit its companion book, which is the Complete Book of Predictive Astrology, which really tells us how to answer questions using astrology and various forms of charts out there. But the goal for this study group is so that you'll be able to hopefully read and interpret a natal chart or your birth chart. So let's run into brass tacks. Everybody is familiar with astrology via their sun sign, you know, what horoscope you are. Very popular beginning in the 1930s with the newspaper articles that showed, you know, what's going on in Aries. I'm an Aries personally. What's going on in Cancer, what's going on in Sagittarius and Aquarius, all of that. We'll meet those a little later on. But sun signs is only one little bit of who you are astrologically speaking. And we're going to figure out what all the other aspects are, including astrological aspects. But sun sign is your ego. It's what your ego is up to. But as far as history is concerned, where did astrology come from? 16th century BC, Babylonians developed the earliest bit of astrology, which we will call mundane astrology, which was the using the stars and constellations in order to figure out what was going on with countries, with like coups and wars, and what's going on with the economy and all of that. That is mundane astrology. Now that gave way to something called electional astrology, which actually gets down to the events, predicting events that are going to happen with the stars. And soon enough, in the 7th through the 4th century BC, natal astrology was developed, which is the idea of looking at the human's potential via their natal chart, what was going on in the cosmos when you were born. Now in the 2nd to 3rd century AD, during the time of the ancient Egypt under King Ptolemy I Soter, the great library was built. And this is when you have certain aspects in astrology come to be, such as the ascendant or the rising sign. So your ascendant sign is also your sun sign, which one you're born on rules your first house. We'll get into that a little later. The idea of mid-heaven, houses of astrology, planetary rulers, the aspects and predictive techniques were all developed underneath the ancient Egyptians from the 2nd to the 3rd centuries. Soon afterwards, astrology kind of backed down, and we didn't see so much of it anymore because other, well, not real sciences, but what we come to know as the quote-unquote real sciences being looked at. Early medicine, early physics, chemistry, all of that. Alchemy was getting very big. But in 1000 AD, we had a revival, and astrology actually became a required course of study for medical students. And that's where we see alchemy and astrology and all of that come together into the Renaissance, but then we have the Catholic Church coming in and pretty much opposing all of these metaphysical studies. In the 1930s, we see the boom of astrology come back with the invention of the modern horoscope, which was first printed in London's Sunday Express. And from there we see what astrology and newspaper and the media is now. But in the 20th century we finally see something happening in the astrological field, something called psychological astrology, which was more prevalent over predictive astrology. And psychological astrology is pretty much just what it sounds like. It's using the stars to figure out what's going on in your mind. And this whole concept, every bit of astrology comes from the idea of as above, so below. So what's going on in the macrocosm of the universe, what's going on in space, has a lot to do with what's going on Earth, and what even further going down in the further microcosm, what's going on in the individual, in society even. So as above, so below, a very important concept when understanding astrology. But the big four, as far as astrology is concerned, when we get down to the facts and what is what, the big four, we have the zodiacal, the 12 zodiacal signs, and the planets, of which there are 10. We'll get into that in a moment as well. We have the 12 houses, and we also have the aspects. So let's delve right into what is what. Let's begin with the 12 signs. And here they are right here. We have the 12 signs. Zodiacal signs that we're all very familiar with. In other words, ever hear the question, what sign are you? Personally, I'm an Aries, and they go in order. We have Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. That is the order in which they go. Aries begins on the 21st of March, with Pisces ending on the 20th of March. Each of them approximately 2 months. Now, when we're talking geometrically and how the signs deal with the chart, if you look at a chart, it's usually in a circle with 12 sections being the 12 houses. And each of those houses is ruled by one of the signs. We'll get into that a little later on as well. But each of the sign, therefore, in the circle, a circle is 360 degrees. So we have these 12 signs. That means each sign is 30 degrees. And further, in each 30 degree, we have 1 degree is worth 60 minutes. And of course, each minute is worth 60 seconds. And that helps us to pinpoint where exactly each of these constellations are and the planets are in relation to you when you're born, which is why your birth hour and minute, and even down to the second in some cases, is extremely important when mapping out your astrological potentiality as far as where you're going in life. Now, and in the center of the natal chart, this big circle, you'll see examples of them sooner or later. In the center of it, you have to predict, because that's where the Earth is. That's where you are as well. And oddly enough, all of the directions are reversed. We have south at the top, north at the bottom, and of course east and west are reversed as well. But we're talking about the signs, and again we have them in order from Aries to Pisces. Again, I'll just list off again. We have Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. Now, there are two things about the signs you need to understand. They also fall under subcategories. Which element are they ruled by, and what is the quality? Well, Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius are all fire elements. Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn are all earth elements. Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, all of them are air elements, or air signs rather. And finally, we have Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces are all water signs. Now, what exactly does that mean? Well, fire signs tend to be more outgoing and action-oriented. Earth signs tend to be practical and realistic, down to earth. We have the air signs tend to be more intellectual and even people-oriented. And finally, we have the water signs tend to be more emotional and intuitive, more feminine, if you will. But then we have the three qualities. Each of the signs fall under an element, but each of the elements sort of fall under a quality. And those three qualities, we have the cardinal, the fixed, and the mutable. Now, to be a cardinal sign, you are known as someone who is self-starting. The cardinal signs are self-starters, which means they tend to be self-motivated and rather ambitious. Now, the cardinal signs, we have Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. Again, that is Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. All of those are cardinal signs. So, for example, Aries would be cardinal fire, and Capricorn would be cardinal earth. That's what that means. And to be cardinal, again, they are self-motivated and ambitious individuals. But then we have the quality of being fixed. And being fixed is determined, stable, and consistent. And each of the signs that tend to be fixed, we have Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. Again, that is Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius are all fixed signs. For example, Taurus would be fixed Earth. And again, those are people that tend to be stable and consistent. And finally, the third and final quality, of course, is the mutable quality, when these people tend to be easygoing and adaptable. And the mutable signs are Sagittarius, Virgo, Gemini, and Pisces. So as an example, again, we have Pisces would be mutable water. Now I keep using phrases like mutable water, fixed fire, and cardinal earth. Well, what exactly does that mean? Well, it comes to the idea that both the element and the quality of the sign equal exactly who you are, in a sense. So again, we'll pick on Aries again, only because I'm an Aries, so why not use a sign that I'm familiar with. Aries is cardinal fire. So that means Aries tend to be self-motivated and ambitious, while also being outgoing and action-oriented. So they can be leaders, action-oriented people who are also self-motivated. They don't need to follow somebody else, so Aries tends to be leaders. Let's pick out another example. Why don't we say Aquarius? And Aquarius is a fixed air sign, which means that Aquarius, being intellectual and people-oriented, is also determined and stable. So they tend to make good parents, good teachers, for instance. Now, if we continue on, we will enter into the planets. And there are 10 planets. Now, why in astrology do we have 10 planets? Well, it's quite easy. You'll learn in school that you have the 8 planets, which are all Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and of course Pluto. In astrology, Pluto is not a dwarf planet, it's still a regular planet. But where do the extra 2 come from? Well, that is the Sun and the Moon, which are also sometimes known as luminaries, or light bringers. So there are 10 planets altogether. We have the Sun, the Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. So, they all have their own interesting meanings. We have the Sun. Sun tends to rule over the ego. It points out to such qualities, individuality and confidence. We have the Moon, which deals with emotions and habits. Mercury, which is known for communication and the thought process we go through. Venus, we have, of course, love, but we also have money and powers of attraction. Mars tends to deal with energy, energy, initiative, and temper. Finally, we have Jupiter, which deals with expansion and good fortune. We have Saturn, which deals with restriction, responsibility, and life lessons. And finally, we have Uranus. Well, no, not finally. I keep wanting to say finally for some reason. But we have Uranus, which deals with independence and eccentricity. We have Neptune, which deals with vision, creativity, and illusion. And this time, for real, finally, we have Pluto, which deals with transformation and, of course, major change. So, and each and every one of these sun signs actually has a planetary ruler, which is why you see the other symbols next to the sun signs. We first have Aries, which is ruled by Mars. Taurus, which is ruled by Venus. We have Gemini, ruled by Mercury. Cancer, which is ruled by the Moon. Leo, ruled by the Sun. Virgo is also ruled by Mercury, as is Gemini. So Virgo ruled by Mercury. Libra is ruled by Venus, which also rules Taurus. So again, Libra ruled by Venus. We have Scorpio, which is ruled by Pluto. We have Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter. Capricorn, ruled by Saturn. We have Aquarius, which is ruled by Uranus. And finally, we have Pisces, which is ruled by Neptune. Now that's a lot of information all at once. I'm not going to delve into that too much this week, but as the weeks progress, we'll understand what exactly that means. But if we continue on the quote-unquote lesson for the day, I want to first point out a couple of key words that we will encounter as we go through. These are retrograde, direct motion, and a phrase that I'm going to refer to as at station. We have a question out there?
Retell them the books that you're using.
The books, okay. The books that we're using, for those of you out there that are just joining us, we have Llewellyn's Complete Book of Astrology, which is the easy way to learn astrology by Chris Brandt Risk. So again, that is the complete book, Llewellyn's Complete Book of Astrology. It's going to be the Bible for this particular study group. And hopefully, if we move on, we will also be using its companion book, which is the Complete Book of Predictive Astrology by the same author.
The second question they had is this natal astrology?
Yes.
Okay.
This is going to be natal astrology. But actually, all of these signs and all of these qualities and aspects will deal with every aspect of astrology. It just depends upon which way you're interpreting it. In the end, we're going to be dealing with natal astrology. It's the easiest, it's the most basic, and it deals with the individual. Now, as I was saying, a couple of key words we need to look at right now are retrograde, direct motion, and a phrase I'm going to use, which is at station, when a planet is at its station. Now, we all, if we're really into astrology, we've all heard the term, such terms as Mercury retrograde. Okay? And retrograde is in essence when a planet, quote-unquote, moves backwards. At a certain state in its path around the sun in which it seems to us to be moving backwards. So since Mercury deals with communication, if we are in Mercury retrograde, that means communication can easily go awry. But it happens to other planets as well. For instance, if Uranus is in retrograde, since Uranus deals with such things as eccentricity, could be meaning something along the lines of that around this time it's not going to be quite as crazy, for lack of a better phrase. Direct motion, symbolized mostly by the D, and of course retrograde by this funny RX symbol. But direct motion, mostly symbolized by the capital D, bold capital D, is pretty much a planet's normal way of going, how it is normally when it's not in retrograde and when it's not at station. Which brings it ahead to what is at station. That's the point in which it seems to stop. A planet seems to stop. And what happens is it's going along in direct motion, seems to slow down and stop, which is when it's at station. But then after it's at station, it begins to go back into retrograde, and that will happen again. We'll go back and forth. When the planet is at station, or at its station, it means that the aspect that the planet rules is a bit more powerful and a bit more prevalent. Again, using Mercury right here, the symbol right here. If Mercury is at station, that means we will be experiencing some brilliant communication at that time. Now that brings me into the 12 houses. Now, for all intents and purposes right now, we'll be looking at it in how a natural chart is. A natural chart begins with its first house in Aries, the common wheel of the year through the sun signs. So, the first house is ruled by Aries, and the planetary ruler is Mars, and that deals with the self and the personality. The second house is ruled by Taurus, which is ruled by Venus, which deals with personal finances and possessions. Finally, we have the third house, ruled by Gemini, which is ruled by Mercury, which deals with communication and learning style. The fourth house, ruled by Cancer, which is planetary ruler is the moon, which deals with the home and family life. The fifth house, ruled by Leo, the sun as well, which deals with children, sports, and creativity. We have the sixth house, which is ruled by Virgo, and also Mercury, which deals with the work environment and of health. Excuse me. We have the seventh house, ruled by Libra and Venus, which deals with partnerships and close relationships. We have the eighth house, ruled by Scorpio and Pluto, deals with something called joint resources and others' money. Money is going on around you. And we have the ninth house, which deals with Sagittarius and Jupiter, which deals with higher education and travel. Finally, we also have the 10th house, which rules by Capricorn, and of course Saturn, which deals with career and status. The 11th house, which is Aquarius, and that Aquarius is ruled by Uranus, which deals with friends and group associations. Finally, we have the 12th house, which is ruled by Pisces, and Neptune, which deals with the subconscious and spirituality. Now that's how it is in the natural chart, Aries first. However, say you're a Leo. Well, then your first house is ruled by Leo. Now that still deals with the self and the personality. But let's say now being Taurus in the natural house, second house, deals with personal finances and possessions. That is Taurus. However, if you're a Leo, that means the second house is actually ruled by Virgo. So personal finances and possessions tend to deal a bit with Virgo. For instance, this will all be explained in weeks to come, so don't dwell too much on this. But that is an example as to why birth time is so essential, because it gives us the accuracy into where these signs and planets fall within your chart. Now I'm going to deal with four rather interesting, well, a number of very interesting, let's see my computer now, vocabulary words. Let me just clean this off for you so I can get a bit more visual going on. And we're going to go into something called the angular house cusps and the aspects. Now again, not all of this is going to make sense this week, but in the weeks to come, it'll all seem to flow together. So, basically, a chart is circular. And is, of course, much like our Earth, separated into hemispheres, quadrants as well. And in each of the four sections, you'll actually see a total of 3 in each here. So altogether, these show the houses. We now have 12. Of course, we have the first house, then the second, third, fourth, writing at an angle here, fifth, sixth, seventh, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th.
Can you make those lines a little stronger?
And the 12th. Well, I can certainly try.
They're saying you need wider, wider markers.
Yeah, that's probably true.
We'll get them for next week.
that a little better? So, in the natural chart, first house is going to be ruled by Aries, as that is the first sign. And it goes around Taurus, can't remember. Aries, Taurus, it will come to me. It's an air sign. First air sign. I'm going to cheat for a minute here. A Gemini. Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, etc. And those all deal with separate things here. But now we're looking at the. Now we're going to look here at the angular house cusps. Now again, to also give you an idea of how the directions work when we're talking about astrology, it's a little different because all the directions are kind of screwed up. We have the south up here, the north is down here, east is on the left, then west is on the right. So everything's reversed in essence. But on each of the four cardinal directions, we have the four major angular house cusps. And we first have the ascendant, or the ASC, the ascendant sign, which is your house sign. What's your ascendant sign? I'm born on March 22nd, so therefore, that's the second day of Aries. My ascendant sign is Aries, much like it is in the natural chart. And this will deal with your outward personality. In other words, the first impression that you give people. So technically, this is at 0 degrees, right here. Exists at 0 degrees, or 30 to 60 degrees, depending on how you're looking at it. Now, on the other side, you will have the descendant, or the DESC, abbreviation, descendant. And the descendant is working on the 7th house cusp, right here, in that area. And it deals with relationships, or how you relate to people. For instance, that would be Libra on the natural chart, which means that we're all looking, in the case of the natural chart or case of an Aries chart, the way you deal with other people is that you try and find the balance that you need, Libra being the scales. Now, down at the bottom, or at north here, we have something called the IC. It's probably going to be difficult to see down there, but the IC stands for Imum Coli, which is the 4th house cusp, and that deals primarily with the home life, both literally and sort of figuratively, and we'll understand what that quite means when we continue on. But finally, we have midheaven up at the top here, which is actually abbreviated MC, and that deals with career interests and what you as the person wants to be remembered for. So, altogether, we have 0 degrees at the ascendant, which is the sun sign, outward personality. We go down to the Imum Coli, or the IC, which is at, let me see now, gotta do some math in my head. 30 degrees, 60, is that 90? This is that. 90 degrees down here. Over here at the descendant, we have 180 degrees. And finally, up at the top, we have 270 degrees at midheaven. So ascendant at 0 degrees, IC at 90 degrees, DC at 180 degrees, and midheaven at 270 degrees. Alright, we're down to the last little bit here, which deals with the aspects that we're going to learn about. Now, the aspects talk about how all of this relates to each other on the chart. So, clean this up real fast. There are a few aspects. I'll switch colors. Well, no, this is going to be darker. Let's keep it green. We have 5 major aspects. We have the conjunction, it is at 0 degrees. That symbol there. We have the sextile. We have the trine. We have the square. And finally we have the opposition. Okay. Here are the different symbols. Okay. Now originally these aspects were looked at in 2 different ways. Very simple, good and bad. The only one that didn't really fall into that was the conjunction right here. The conjunction was either good or bad depending on the planets it dealt with. Now, seeing that it is at 0 degrees, that means these planets are conjunct. They are right next to each other, so there is no separation between them in the chart. Moving on, we have the sextile, which are 2 planets 60 degrees apart. All this will make sense geometrically as we continue on. And the sextile is a good aspect signifying opportunity. Then we have the trine at 120 degrees, represented by the triangle, deals with luck or ease, so it is also a good aspect. Moving on, we have the square at 90 degrees, represented by the square, which deals with obstacles and actions. That's still a bad thing. Things you need to do, obstacles that stand in your way, you need to resolve. So bad, but not necessarily. And finally, we of course have the opposition at 180 degrees, which deals with separation and polarity. And all of these have to do with planetary relation, and will make a lot more sense again as we continue on through the study process. But as you can see, they do all have degrees separating them. Sextile, 60 degrees apart. You know, an angle of about there. Okay, 120 degrees. Say big obtuse angle, double the size. 90 degrees, we know. That's not at all 90 degrees. Very popular thing. Finally, opposition, just as it is, a line. So that's why. Sorry about this, folks. We're going to be dealing with circles and triangles, so lots of geometry is involved in astrology. But I assure you, it's fairly simple. Simple geometry, and just addition and subtraction is involved in astrology. That pretty much covers the intro to astrology. I know it's a lot of information, but hopefully as we go on it'll make a lot more sense. And just a little bit of extra information. There is something out there called an ephemeris. What an ephemeris is pretty much a chart of numbers and symbols, much like the ones you've seen here, which actually help a person to hand do a natal chart, which by the end of this we'll understand how to do. And the ephemeris actually tells us the position of the planets, the angles at which they are, and all that good stuff. It's not necessary because there are plenty of programs out there that work for it, but in the book, again, the Complete Book of Astrology, Llewellyn's Complete Book of Astrology, it tells you what an ephemeris is, shows you an example of one, and where you can find one, And also in the back of this book, good thing about this, if you really want to see what a natal chart looks like, well, first of all, there are plenty of examples of the natal chart. I don't know if you can see that, but there's an example of a natal chart right there. Looks really complicated, but hopefully towards the end of this it won't. But even better, towards the end of the chart, towards the end of the book, there is actually an offer. I don't know if it's still active, but I'm assuming it is if they're still making the book. It has a form where you can get a free birth chart. Hopefully, eventually, look yours over and see if you can interpret it. There's also a guide in the back to all of these symbols, plus others we didn't cover tonight that we hopefully will cover soon. And so that covers it all for this week. And if you like what you see, do indeed come back next week for the Astrology Study Group and like it right down there on YouTube. Comment about it. Tell your friends. Go crazy. Whatever. Hope you enjoyed it. And we'll see you next week. May you blessed be.